So thank you. Again, I'm Diane Baima. I'm Florence Shebetka's daughter, and I grew up in Elk River, Minnesota, and I came to Zion as a child, and so this is my home. I'm coming back home. I have been teaching for my whole life, but about 10 years ago, I decided to move to Ukraine in 2014. It was interesting time for me to choose to move to Ukraine because the war had already started in 2014, but I was assured it was safe at that time, and so I moved there. And a few years in, I met my husband, Yuri, a Ukrainian, and so I moved out. He has a farm, very small farm outside of Kyiv, and I moved out there with him during COVID, so our whole married life has been COVID and now war. So, so we've been married for 5 years now. So in February of 2022, the war started. The war started in 2014, but for us, the war got very close to home in February, and we had to decide, leave, stay, and we decided to stay. So I didn't leave. I stayed through the whole first part of the war. I was working online. The school stayed open. We just kept going. So I came home a year and a half later to visit Mom. So I was here last summer, and I came back this summer to see family. So that's a little bit about me. So I'm going to do a short presentation. Can everybody hear in the back? Am I speaking? Yes? Okay. I'll do a short presentation, and then after that, a lot of times people have a lot of questions. So I'm hoping I leave a lot of time for questions. So this is my family. This is me and my Yuri and his mother. She is almost 91. So she has lived through famines in Ukraine. Russia, during the Soviet times, Russia took all the grain from Ukraine several times in the periods to starve out Ukrainians, to subdue them. And she's lived through those and the war. So she's a tough nut. And two of our dogs, and I have a few more pictures of our animals. Yuri likes to beekeep, so we have 6 hives now. And these are we have sheep and goats, and this is our sort of puppy. He's 2 now, but almost 2, but he's still our puppy. We have 2 cats, and we have lots of baby sheep also. It's just a hobby for us, but we enjoy it. So this is Ukraine. Before, in 2015, when I first moved there, and there were 2 parts of Ukraine that had been taken over by Russia, just way over here and in Crimea. And we are up here in Kyiv. So at that time, that's how much Russia had of Ukraine. This is in June 25th, 2024. I didn't get a whole picture of Ukraine, but the yellow part is what Ukraine took, or what Russia took right away in the war, and Ukraine got back right away. So you can see it got very, very, very near us, and I'll talk more about that later. But this whole section is still under Russian occupation. So I'm a teacher. I teach 1st and 2nd grade at a very small private elementary school. It's a bilingual program, so they spend half the day with me and half in English program and half the day with Ukrainian program. So they'll become bilingual. These are two of my students. We were making cards to send to the soldiers at the front. These are more different, just fun pictures of the kids having picnics and doing experiments. They were doing a soil count of what was in different kinds of soil one day. It was at Halloween. Even though there's a war going on, you want to do as much as you can to make sure that the children are having a childhood. So we do as much as we can to have different fun occasions for them and things. This is the second picture. The children were gathering food. We had a food drive to send to the soldiers at one point that they wanted to be a part of. This was our bomb shelter last year. It was very, very small. It was just a small basement, and there were 3 tiny rooms with about 60 of us sitting in there. And it was just really crowded and noisy and stuffy most of the time. But it was safe, and some days we could spend 3 hours in the bomb shelter. Some days we'd spend half an hour in the bomb shelter. Some days we'd be free from the bomb shelter. Some days they would be short, but we'd run down there 3 times a day. You never know what's going to happen, but we always hope that it wasn't at lunchtime, because trying to eat lunch in a bomb shelter is just awful. It's just not fun. But the school built a new great big bomb shelter, probably as big as this room, but divided into smaller rooms so that we could actually have classes and study with the children. So the school invested in a new bomb shelter because we don't see that the war is going to end soon, and we need to keep on with the children's education, because they couldn't do anything while we're in the bomb shelter when there's too many kids and not enough tables. So here's them reading and playing in the bomb shelter. This was on Children's Day. This June 1st is International Children's Day, and the kids went out and they were doing chalk art, and my kids made a chalk art of the school, and then this sweetheart, Denise, made one of the bomb shelter, because now the bomb shelter is just really a part of their lives. Without the bomb shelter, nobody likes to go to the bomb shelter, but without the bomb shelter, the kids wouldn't have a school, because you have to have kids in a safe place during air raids. So we're thankful for our bomb shelter. This was before the war started. The kids, we'd made New Year's wishes. And so one of them wished that nobody died, and another wished that the war to end. Because remember, the war started in 2014. So for them, even though the war, the big attack on Ukraine hadn't started yet, for them the war has been going on for longer than they've been living. So, So I wanted to say before we go back. So I looked up a couple data points about Ukraine, and so as of January 2024, 200 schools have been completely destroyed in Ukraine, and 1,600 have been damaged. So right now, about 900,000 children are having to study remotely. They don't have a school. And a lot of the schools, if they don't have a bomb shelter, they can't have school either. So there's a lot of children who are missing school from first COVID and now the war. And it's really painful to teach first and second graders online. It doesn't work very well. So that's some news about the schools, and so that's why we're so thankful for bomb shelters. These are some pictures. I help a Ukrainian volunteer named Sveta, and I raise money at my school because our families are safe. We're in a safe part of Kyiv. We haven't been affected by the war. Our houses are safe. And so we've done lots of different humanitarian drives and food drives and clothing drives, and friends from the United States have also given me money, and I give that money to this woman, Sveta, and she distributes it to displaced people throughout Ukraine. She lives in the Irpin area, and we load up our car and bring everything to her. So 10 million people have been displaced since the war began. And some of them are displaced in Ukraine, and some of them are living in other countries. And so I've been working with Sveta on people who've been displaced in Ukraine because they also need as much help. They've lost their homes, they've lost everything, now they have to start over in a new place. So these are just some of the photos of the different things that we've raised money for. The washing machines, and because some of them have 6 children, and can you imagine living without a washing machine for so long with 6 children? And so I wanted to talk to you about a special place to me. So this is in the middle is Kyiv, the capital city. And we pronounce it not Kiev, but Kyiv. In Ukrainian, we say Kyiv. So from now on, just say Kyiv. And we never say the Ukraine, you say Ukraine. Ukrainians think the Ukraine was a way that Russian language used to kind of put Ukraine as a less than a country. So whenever you try from now on, say Ukraine and not the Ukraine, and say Kyiv and not Kiev. Kiev is the Russian pronunciation. So, but this is Kyiv. This is where our little farm is down here. It's about 40 minutes from driving into the outskirts of Kyiv. This is where my school is, over here. So I take these back roads, little forest roads to school. Sometimes I'll see horses and fox, and it's very pretty. Up here is Irpin and Bucha and Gostomel. And at the very beginning of the war, Russia came down through Belarus and through Russia, and they were trying to encircle Kyiv through this area. And this is where my husband grew up, is in this city. And this is where a good share of my friends from my former job in Ukraine live, and some of them work there. So this is a very important city. This is my husband's family was there. And so the Battle of Irpin started on February 27th. And right at the very beginning of the war, let me see what I put next. The Ukrainians themselves destroyed the bridge between them and Kyiv to stop the Russians from being able to attack Kyiv. So they destroyed the bridge, and so they were cut off also from Kyiv and from being safe. On March 2nd, the airstrike started on this city, and we were very worried and wondered, we had constant friends would just post anytime they can so that we know they are okay, that they're okay. My husband was in constant touch with his nephew. On March 3rd, they decided that they needed to evacuate the people of these 3 cities. But as Ukrainians, a lot of them just held out. They didn't want to leave their homes. They didn't want to abandon their homes. They didn't want to abandon what they'd worked so hard for, and they wanted to fight. On March 6th, Russia captured a good part of the city, and they started shelling the evacuees. So people were trying to evacuate, and they were just shooting at civilians. And probably if you watched the beginning of the war, these are the places that you saw, these were the visions you saw, and this was my friends and family thinking, oh dear. So on the 7th, they had to completely clear out, and the people were hiding under the broken bridge, and Russia was trying to strike the bridge. They were hiding under there, and I mean, obviously these are not soldiers. These are evacuees, and Russia was trying to kill them. And so March 7th was when people were coming out. My husband's sister, my sister-in-law, and her and nephew and my nephew, they escaped at that time. They got on some bus with nothing. They spent the night in a subway station because it's a safe place to be, and they called and said, "Can we get to you and stay with you?" So then they got across the city, and my husband went and picked them up and brought them out to our house. So they stayed with us for many, many months until the city was able to get electricity and water again so that they could go back home. So by March 14th, half the city was occupied. We didn't know what was going on. My other friends, they lost, one of my close friends, her house was had an airstrike and it was completely lost. Another friend, they just lost all the windows. My husband's childhood apartment, luckily just the windows got blown out. The house across the street was completely gone, but their apartment, just the windows were blown out. So it was a really hard time. At this time, I had another close friend in this area who lived in Bucha, and she owns a cookie factory, and she happened to be on vacation at the beginning of the war. So suddenly, her whole life, her cookie factory that she adores, was being used as a base by the Russians. They took all the food, they took all the supplies, they took all the food, and they took all the equipment and everything. They stole it for themselves, and they were using it as a base to shoot. So she's far away, just watching her life crumble. But as of now, even I think less than a year later, the whole factory's working again. They got everything going up again. They're even added to it as Ukrainians do. So you can see that the Ukrainians, they're gonna keep fighting. No matter what, they're gonna keep fighting. And her cookie factory is going again. This was a picture I took in August of 2022 of the bridge. This is the first time that Yuri brought me into Irpin. We had to figure out what to do with the apartment that was wrecked. And so I took a picture of the broken bridge because for me that broken bridge is the symbol of the war. And now, as of November 2023, they have rebuilt the bridge. So they were rebuilding, and here they've rebuilt the bridge. So now it's again a symbol for me of hope. So, but Irpin at that time, as one of the cities that got hit early in the war, 300 civilians and 50 children and 50 soldiers were killed right at in that little small city, and 750 were wounded. So I'm so thankful that my friends and family got out, but a lot of people didn't, and it's still just, every time I go there, it just hurts to be in this city. So, let's see. So, this is me back home with my mom. So I'm so thankful for United States support, for the Ukrainian army, for keeping me safe so that I could come back here so I can see my mom again. There's just, I don't know how to explain to you what it feels like to live through a war and then to know that I can get through it and that we can get through it if we stick together. So I think I will stop, and maybe you have questions, and if you don't have questions, then I will keep talking, but I'll let you ask some questions, I think, if you have any about living in Ukraine. No?
Is there a lot of anger in Ukraine that NATO won't go there and put a stop to that?
Is there a lot of what?
Anger that NATO won't come in.
Well, I can speak for my own husband that he understands, logically he can understand why NATO's not coming in. Obviously he wants more help, and we're always needing more help and thankful for what we're getting. But obviously the 6 months when we weren't getting help from the United States was stressful and hard, but it's not an anger. It's how are we going to do it anyway? So they're always thinking of a different way to. They're planning. They're just going to plan. They're resilient. Yeah, it's a resilience. It's not an anger. It's tired, but not anger. Yes.
The Donetsk region.
Yes.
The industrial region was primarily Russian-speaking.
The Russians would like you to think that. The friends that I have from Donetsk who've had to move here, I teach with a teacher from Donetsk, and in 2014, she is a Ukrainian teacher. That's in the schools they taught Ukrainian, and that's the official language. And so they and most teachers had to leave because they would be persecuted under Russian occupation. They had to leave, so she moved to Kharkiv and started working there, teaching Ukrainian again. And then when Kharkiv at the beginning of the war was under fire, they decided to move to Kiev because they have children and they just wanted to be in a calmer spot to live. So they speak Russian, but they know Ukrainian's their national language. Generally everybody speaks Russian, can speak Russian because they were taught it at school, because they were under the Soviet rule, and because it's an international language. But they speak Ukrainian. They're proud of their language. Yes?
What allies are helping?
What allies are helping Ukraine?
Correct.
Well, most of Western Europe is going. I would say that all of Western Europe except for Hungary is helping. Is in my thing, the United States is helping a lot. Canada, some country in South America, but I can't remember which one. Japan, Korea. So, yeah. Yes.
Could you share more about like your daily life compared to those that live in an area where it's not as safe as far as food supply, electricity, access to water, etc.?
Right. So for us, it changes depending on what's happening. But the beginning of the war, there was electricity. There was no gas. No gas. You couldn't go anywhere. There was very little gas. But the electricity was okay. We had blackouts, like you would imagine, even though everybody had blackouts and it was just dark. Then we went through the phase but there's always been food because Ukraine is an agricultural country, so we have never had any shortage of food. There's been times when you don't, some import maybe you were interested in isn't going to be there, but there's food for us, and there's generally we've sent food to the front lots of times. Different groups pack up bags and send food off, but our supermarkets are are working just fine. Electricity has been an on and off situation. Right now, we have at our house electricity we are for sure have 6 hours a day of electricity. They've promised. It's on a schedule. So you know each day the 6 hours that you're going to have it. And then there's a few hours of maybe you'll have electricity if there's enough. And there's a few hours of you will not have electricity. So you have to plan your day around that. My husband's was an electrical engineer, so we had a, what's the word? Generator, thank you. We have a generator. But it's expensive to use a generator and it takes a lot of gas and it's really noisy. So then he bought an inverter system, and then now we are back to this 6 hours a day. So he put in solar panels. So now we have solar panels to do the inverter system, and then so a good share of the day we have electricity. We need them for our plants and our pumps and for our animals. So we decided to invest in solar. Other people are just having to live without electricity if they don't have a generator and a husband who sits and plans these things out. But everybody's used to it. Like without this electricity lately in Kyiv, and Kyiv is generally safe. We have air raids, but it's rare that, nothing ever actually hits us anymore. The defense systems hit them and the shrapnel might fall down. But we don't have traffic lights working in most of the city. And it's a big city. It's a really big city. So to not have traffic lights is very special. So when I've had to drive in, I think, how do I avoid that left turn so that I don't have to try to... People take turns, and you'd be surprised at how well it's going and how smoothly the traffic goes. But I'm glad I don't live there. But the people who live in high-rise apartments, which most people do, if there's no electricity, the lift isn't working, and you have to walk up the stairs, or you have to wait. So I know a lot of parents with small children or older people, they have to wait till they have the electricity on so that they can go outside. So but people, people who are young and working, they set their alarm when they know that there'll be electricity. They get up in the middle of the night, take their shower, get ready for work, and then go back to bed. And so they're ready when there's not, everybody just does what they're going to do. And we just have to, because that's the situation. And we're the lucky ones. So having electricity on now, I'm used to, Mom has lights on all the time, and I'm walking around the house turning them off, and yeah. All right. Yes.
What is the relationship, if you know, between the Russian Orthodox Church and the other churches in Ukraine? Because the head of the, I don't know what he's called, patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church is not friendly to Ukraine, I think.
No, the Russian Orthodox Church is, I would say, like a puppet for their government, and they own a lot of the churches in Ukraine. They still are controlling and own the churches. I know in our village, before the war had started, it was under Russian Orthodox Church, and the priest who was in control had the church. I don't quite understand why or how that happened, but he willed the church to his sister, who gave it to a Russian nonprofit, and so our church in our village isn't owned by the people who built it. And so they're in the courts right now fighting to get this church back. So yeah, one of the things that happened I'm not sure if it was 2020, that the president at that time signed a decree to get rid, to take the Ukrainian Orthodox Church separated and have its own entity from the Russian Orthodox Church. And that was a big step, but there's still much of the church, what Ukrainians have been doing, have been trying to just push them out and get their churches back.
So does that, the people that, the congregation of the Russian Orthodox churches, are they at odds with the Ukrainian?
I think they're all just closed. All the churches are the Russian Orthodox churches are closed now. The one in our village is the only one I see, and the church is closed, and they go to a small temple or shrine area, and they have services there. So yes.
What's the procedure right now for
Do the Ukrainians have the capacity to follow the American political scene, and do they have any opinions of what's happening politically in the United States?
I mean, Ukraine's a modern country. We get the news every day. We can hear, we know generally, if you want to, you can find out anything that's happening in the world. My husband wants to watch the ABC World News Tonight every morning for breakfast, so it's what he likes. So, I can speak for my husband and the people that I know personally, and they are very worried about the elections, especially after the 6 months of not having aid come through and having all the fighting. They're very worried about the elections because they don't want more people to die. They're not gonna. They don't want to give up. They can't give up their country, because if we give up Ukraine, I mean, all the teachers will be put. What's happened in the occupied areas are children are kidnapped and re-educated in Russia. The teachers are also sent to, like, not concentration camps, but camps in Russia where they have to be like re-educated, and if they won't support Russia, then they'll stay in those camps like a prison. Anybody who's supporting Ukraine is going to be taken out. So we don't really have a choice. Ukraine has to keep fighting or lose everything. So for them, it's an existential question: who's the president of the United States? Because they see that Biden has supported them, and they see that some other, I don't want to get into politics, but aren't, and they see that not just how do I say it? They see it as their reality. So how many more of our children have to keep fighting? How many more years do we have to keep dying and losing our homes, depending on the United States government? So I hope that answers something. Yes?
So I think you kind of answered it, but in terms of like when you showed the map before, the invasion and the territory being back, now there's a lot of talks about ceasefires and basically using Ukraine as a geopolitical pawn. It's almost becoming somewhat of a proxy war, obviously. And so, what do you think of the ceasefire idea? I mean, and I'm sure Russia wouldn't want to keep all the land that they have now, including Crimea. Is that something that's even tenable? And what's the public sentiment on that? Or would that just be delaying it and then the invasion the next? And even if the invasion would come later, it's like the public sentiment on that?
Yeah, the public sentiment on any ceasefire is that you can't trust Russia, ever. I actually spent most of the 90s living in Russia when there was a thaw in the Cold War, and had hopes for Russia, but you can't trust Russia. Russia, if you look back at the history of Russia, it has always been an imperial country. It will always want to be an empire. And if a ceasefire just means that they can build up and start attacking again when they have a chance. So for Ukrainians, that's not an option. They're not thinking about it. They're not planning on it. It's just noise here. But it's not something that's going to happen. I'm going to come back to you now.
I'm just curious, what is the procedure for drafting young men, young women for military service?
I think the ages are 18 to 55. It might be 60, but it's 55 or 60. For women, they're not drafted. They're fighting. There's many women fighting, but they're not drafted. So now, because they are looking for more people to fight, they need more soldiers. There are checkpoints. And I don't get stopped at the checkpoints because I'm female, so they're not looking for me, but they're checking to see that the young men who should be fighting are fighting, and they check their papers. So my husband, he's older, so he's not qualified to fight. He actually tried to volunteer at the beginning of the war, but they said he's too old. So they stop him and check his papers. And they do it early in the morning. Like, I guess there's an app now that people can have to try to avoid it, which is sad. But there used to be an app to try to figure out where you could get gas when there was no gas too. So there's an app for everything. But I know some a friend, her husband was drafted maybe about 5 months ago, and it's like, okay, I'm drafted, I'm going. So, and there's still volunteers. But they do need more young men, and that's how they're finding them, I guess.
Do you know the duration of the service that would be required to come into?
I thought it was 2 years. I'm not sure exactly on everything, because sometimes they say it's 2 years, and sometimes I've heard that they haven't had a break since the beginning of the war. So, or any long breaks. They've had short weekend or week-long breaks, but not long breaks. I know that the people that I know who are serving, they've had month-long breaks, or they've had week breaks and things like that. They've been able to come home, but they weren't drafted. They were servicemen. So, yes.
How can we help you?
How can you help me? Well, you can pray. You can politically, we need help. You can tell the people, your representatives, that you want to support Ukraine, that you want the United States to support Ukraine. We're worth it. I have to say, it's a beautiful country. It's not just me loving my husband. It's a really beautiful country. The people are worth supporting. They love freedom. They love democracy. They're willing to fight and do anything to keep themselves free and to keep Europe free. So talking to your politicians would be great. I always support my friend Sveta, so if you want to give money, I will send it to Sveta for humanitarian use. All of our donations, my husband and I, we send money for drones. We buy drones. So if you want, and oftentimes we have, my husband has a good friend who's serving, and our money just goes directly to him, and he buys the equipment that their group needs. So I can, monetarily is great. As far as things, Ukraine has its own economy, so sending medical equipment, I think, is very useful, but other things we can get in Ukraine. So does that help you to, yeah? Yes?
Generally, how do people look at Zelensky?
I can say that I see the polls, and generally my friends all say he should stay president while the war is happening and things. My husband really doesn't like Zelensky at all, and I don't know that I completely agree with him, but he really doesn't like Zelensky. He thinks that he's not good for Ukraine. But most people are supporting him. Oh.
The lights are on.
Yeah.
But isn't he better than what you had before?
My husband would say that the president that we had for a short time before, after 2014, was better. I think most people would say that they're both patriots. And I would say that myself. So I can't say exactly because my husband's very strong about it, but the rest of the Ukrainian population is supporting Zelensky. So I tend to be on both sides. I can see that he's made mistakes. I can see that he's done great things. Yes.
There's a Ukrainian church in the Ham Lake. Should we relate to them as a congregation or individuals?
I'm sorry, one more time?
Ukrainian church in Ham Lake, Minnesota.
Ah, okay.
Should we relate to them somehow? Can they help us? Can we help them?
I don't know this church, but I'm sure that if it's a Ukrainian church, that they're doing many, many things to help Ukraine, and that you could contact them and ask them how they would like you to help. There's many, many organizations in Minnesota that are helping Ukraine, and a lot of people just want to go directly to me because then it's not through an organization. I just give it to Sveta, and she takes care of the people that she's taking care of. So the smaller the smaller the organization sometimes is the money gets through faster. I'm sorry, yes.
At one point, Ukraine was known as the breadbasket of Europe.
It still is, yes.
I see pictures of some of the fields that are full of bomb craters and that type of thing going on.
Right, so some of it's a farmer has his own, it's dangerous to be a farmer, but yes, the fields, Ukraine is flat, it's full of fields, it's full of sunflower fields, it's full of wheat fields, it's full of corn fields, it's a very, very agricultural country. Every Ukrainian, from the poorest to the wealthiest, their love is their garden. Their yard, their garden, and trees, and thinking about what fruit trees they have. No matter what walk of life they are in, they want to get together and they'll talk about what they're growing and food. So it's just who they are. Yes.
So with only 6 hours of electricity, how is like your nursing homes and hospitals, do they just have big generators?
Generators, yeah. They have to have generators. Everyone has generators, and it's noisy. The whole city is kind of noisy because there's generators going on everywhere. But any more questions? Yes.
Do you think your country is planning for change, if there's a change in our administration, are they planning both ways?
Yes.
They are?
Well, they have to, yes.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
Yes, so I know that's what they have to do. They have to keep up diplomacy with their friends.
Yeah.
Yes.
You said you taught half the day in Ukrainian and half.
No, I don't.
No, but-
I teach first grade. Like I'll teach first grade in the morning and second grade in the afternoon,
English.
and then the Ukrainian teacher will switch with me. So.
So has that practice been going on for a long time, or was it Russian and Ukrainian back when they were in control?
Well, these are just bilingual schools. The parents want their children to be bilingual, so they've chosen this kind of school.
Oh, okay.
In the past, there were Russian schools where the kids learned Russian, but they also had Ukrainian classes. They always had Ukrainian classes. Or they might have, but most of the schools are Ukrainian, but the parents might have grown up speaking Russian, so they feel most confident speaking Russian with their children. So, but most of the bilingual schools are English and Ukrainian. They're always Ukrainian, but I think there is a French school, but I think there's only one. But there's lots of bilingual schools like mine. Yes.
Public schools, all public schools, or are they private schools?
I work at a private school. At the public schools, they still every public school still is teaching English along with the basic subjects in Ukrainian. So at the village school near us, I have another American friend. She's the English teacher there, and she's teaching English for the different grade levels, at different times of the day. So a more traditional approach. Whereas I'm teaching English, math, and science all in English for half the day to the children. So, yes.
Do you have dual citizenship, or are you visa to work there?
My citizenship is the United States. I have permanent residency. Now that I've been married, I had to be married 2 years and then another year to get this permanent residency. So that lasts for 10 years before I have to do anything to renew it. So it makes it easier to come in and out of the country, and with all the checkpoints, that it's easier to show them this permanent residency. I don't have to carry my passport with me. So, any other questions, or I will thank you so much for having me. I wasn't expecting this big of a group. But thank you so much, and thank you for your support for Ukraine. We need it. Thank you.
Thank you.